Welcome to Exploring the Paranormal. Hosted by Heather Leigh, PhD, Exploring the Paranormal offers a new, fresh look into paranormal research. Join Heather as she discusses some of the many haunted locations worldwide, discusses why these locations are haunted, hear from paranormal researchers about their personal experiences at these locations. Additionally, Heather takes a journey into the science behind the paranormal, discussing topics such as thermodynamics and the Heisenberg principle, and how they both affect paranormal activity. Now, your host of Exploring the Paranormal, Dr. Heather Leigh.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining Exploring the Paranormal today. I am super excited, as I am every Tuesday. Wish I had this energy all week long, but I wake up early on Tuesdays and drink a lot of coffee, so that way I can be here happy and cheerful for you guys. And today is going to be a very interesting podcast. I do have Anubis Paranormal coming on. I'm hoping they're going to be here. So if not, you guys have me for the whole 2 hours. I've done some digging and some additional research the last couple days on the scientific method, because on Sunday, I don't know if you guys saw on my page, I was on a podcast with Brad and Barry Kling, the Kling brothers from Ghost Lab. I'm like completely drawing a blank here. And one thing that we were talking about was the scientific method and different scientific principles to use in the paranormal field, and how the paranormal field could become a true science, even though we're way, way, way from that. And those of us in the field that use science actually do truly believe it is a true science. So as always, you guys have me babbling, but feel free to ask any questions you have. I always keep an eye on the comments. You guys know that. Feel free to bring up anything paranormal related. Just say hi. I always tell everyone, let me know where you're watching from. You don't need to tell me exact details, just, the state or even the country. Perfect. Love to know that you're here. And so that's basically my quick introduction for you guys. For those of you who are new watching, or if you're watching the replay, welcome to the show. I basically, even though I love to cover scientific topics, I cover everything from paranormal research to haunted locations to, I've had a couple psychics on. And I just love sharing any information related to the paranormal, supernatural, or even just interesting people. So you might even see some non-paranormal investigators on here in the future, not to give away some upcoming guests, but I do have a couple non-paranormal investigators coming on to discuss their life in the paranormal, because their parents have been in it. So they've actually been surrounded by it their entire lives. And I kind of want to talk about how it impacts them. So that'll be a fun one. And for those, like I had said, those of you who are new, again, welcome. But, oh my goodness, I just kind of blanked up. Sorry, guys. Definitely stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to either our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook. You can go to my podcast page, which I will share later, and you can subscribe to that, where you can download all the podcasts and a whole bunch of different things. And then a little bit about me, because I know a lot of new people have been coming on lately. I have more than 30 years in the paranormal field, and definitely had a lot of ups and downs, ins and outs. A lot of information. We were just talking before going live about how I have a brain full of knowledge, but I just can't get it out and say what I'm trying to say. But if you, like I said, if you have questions, let me know. And if I don't know, I'm not one to say I know it all, but I know a lot. And if I don't know it, I definitely know someone who does know the answer, and I can get that for you. I'm also a lecturer and author. I have 2 books currently out: Haunted Southern Nevada Ghost Towns and Ghosts and Legends of the Vegas Valley. And those are actually doing really well. I do have copies on hand. If anyone is interested in an autographed copy, definitely shoot me a message. It's $21.99 plus shipping, and I'll send it directly to you. Or you can get it at the History Press, Arcadia Publishing. Amazon has it as well. Or if you are in Vegas, Walgreens, Target, Walmart, and a couple different museums, such as the Clark County Museum. The Mob Museum has my Vegas book. They have them on location as well, that you can pick them up directly from there. And I think Barnes & Noble carries it as well. I've had a lot of people send me a lot of photos. Oh, good morning, Courtney. Thank you for joining us. So happy to have you here. And then real quick, I'm looking at a few different things, a couple things that I wanted to make sure I touch on. Don't forget, starting in June, we don't have an exact date yet, but we're thinking early June, maybe even June 1st, because it's a Thursday. But Thursday night, Joe Frankie, those of you who've watched this show have seen Joe on here a couple times. And him and I are actually starting our own podcast called Passport to the Paranormal, where we are going to take you on an adventure through our experiences in the paranormal, as well as experiences of other paranormal researchers. We're going to talk about haunted locations and a whole bunch of different methods on actually conducting an investigation. And I know, because Joe likes to help people, as do I, we are also going to be talking about different methods on how to client care and taking care of clients. We'll be doing that. So make sure you stay tuned and keep an eye out for that. That is going to be a fantastic show. As you guys know, I mean, I love working with Joe. I've been working with him, even though it's been virtually. It cracks me up how technology today, we can just do whatever and work however we want. I love it. We've been working virtually with each other for a couple of years now, and looking definitely forward to continuing to work together. We work well whenever when he's on my show. It's just amazing. I mean, actually, I always joke with him, because once you get Joe talking, he doesn't shut up. So he has, you think I have a wealth of knowledge. He has far more knowledge than I do, especially with, he trained with Ed and Lorraine Warren. So he's the guy to pick his brain for information about everything that you guys want to know. And also let me get the exact date for you guys, so that way you know what's coming up. We have my Ghost Education 101. For those of you who don't know, Ghost Education 101, my co-host and I, we started that in, I'm trying to think. We met at the beginning of COVID virtually. I was in Vegas, he was in Atlanta, and a whole bunch of different people got together. We started doing a podcast presentation and discussion on different things in the paranormal, and just, we kind of broke away, and with a few others, and him and I are the last two standing. So we host, and it started off because during COVID, everybody was jumping online. Everybody was doing lives. Everybody was starting podcasts, just to kind of find something to do and to, stay in the paranormal field and keep it relevant. And we were noticing not so much a lot of misinformation, but a lot of not full information. So it's like they would take the story so far and not complete the story, is what we were noticing. So we started that, and we're working on, we bring on guests from all over the world who come on to the show to talk about their paranormal experiences. We have, my favorite guest is always the haunted librarian. She comes on to talk about different presentations, and she adds history to everything and all of that. And in addition to the haunted light, I'm trying to think of the guests that we've had. We've had Lloyd Arbach on several times, Brandon Musala, and it's just, we focused on that one to make it more educational, so that way people can understand. And it's one of those, we're not saying we're right, but we're giving information that we know, and that we know that has worked for us. So definitely make sure you tune in to that one, because that one is more presentation based, even though there are times where we don't have presentations, but that is where you can go, and it's the perfect place to, screenshots. I always tell people, take a quick screenshot of this page. You're going to want it. So it's a great place to learn and do what you're needing. Hi, Luana. Thank you for joining us today. So excited to have you here, and definitely excited to have everyone here. And good morning, Lee. I see you popping on. As always, good to have you here. And so with that being said, oh, real quick, I did want to mention too, don't forget, in September and October, I am teaching virtual classes with TMCC out of Reno. September 25th from 6 to 9 p.m. Pacific. It's going to be a class on the ABCs of paranormal research. And then on October 9th from 6 to 9 p.m. Pacific, it's Ghost Hunting 101. So definitely you want to make sure that you stay tuned, get information on those classes. Cannot wait. I'm putting them together right now, and I am like super excited. The ABC one is so much fun. And it's amazing, how many things in the paranormal field can fit into each letter of the alphabet. It's definitely going to be an interesting course, and a lot of fun. And during the courses, I will be doing, everybody who signs up for the course and attends it the night of the course will be entered to win a autographed copy of one of my books, as well as if you can't make the night of the show, it will be recorded, and everyone who signed up and paid for the class will get a link to watch the recording after the class. And even if you attend it, you'll have that so you can go back to it to review and all of that type of stuff. So we still have a few minutes, and like I said, I know Anson or Christopher posted the other day that he had surgery, and wanted to make sure he was okay. So like I said, he may or may not be on here today. So just feel like sending me any messages you have and letting me know what you guys, questions about the paranormal and everything in that aspect. So what I wanted to talk about today, because I keep getting asked all the time, and like I said, it reminded me when we did the show on Sunday when I was on there with the Kling brothers. I want to start covering more of science and the paranormal. I know that's part of my intro, and that's the whole reason why I founded this show. And just, I want to make sure, I guess the biggest question I get, and I should have saved one of the messages that I had to share with you guys, but the biggest question that I get is, Heather, how can you use the scientific method in the paranormal field? Because the scientific method requires you to repeat the experiment and get the same result before it's considered scientific. When, how do we do that in the paranormal field? It's not like we can, get the ghost to act on command. We not that I encourage it, but we can antagonize them all day and night, and they're not going to do the same thing over and over. We can, be as sweet as possible, day and night, and they're not going to do the same thing over and over. So there are many different ways to tweak it. One, I know some people who are researching right now. I get why they're doing what they're doing, but I would still want to know a little bit more detail. But when they do a scientific experiment, they just look to make sure that they got some type of reaction. So they'll do the experiment and, oh, we got an EVP. And they don't really focus on what the EVP says. And that's mostly because it can be interpreted 100 different ways. One person can hear one thing, another person can hear another. The power of suggestion. So if someone says, hey, this voice says, get out of here. Next thing you know, everybody's hearing get out of here, when in fact it just says, hello. So there's a whole bunch of different things why they do that. And that I completely understand, but I would still want to try to listen and figure out what the ghosts were saying. And they mark it down. Okay, we did this experiment this day, this time. This was the weather conditions. This was the location. Here's, the geothermal activity at the time. It was a full moon. And then they, did you get a response? Yes. Whether it was a knock, but that experiment got a response. Then they go back a few days later, a few weeks later, a couple months later, conduct the same experiment. And they mark down all the conditions, hoping that the conditions are similar. And then they do the experiment. And again, did you get a response? Yes or no? Yes. And then again, a third time. And then if they get responses more than, 2 or 3 times, then they know that experiment works. And that's kind of how we have to do it in the paranormal field. Of course, if we do an experiment and, I'm trying to think. Okay, like using dowsing rods. If you use dowsing rods and you ask a question and they cross, okay, yes, it worked. Not so much the answer, but it worked. Then you ask another question and they spread apart. Not the same answer, but you got a response. So it's kind of like that. They're just more or less looking for the response and not so much what the EVP says. So, and it could be one of those things where, you do the same experiment, ask the same questions, and you get a response. One time you get a response that says yes. One time you get a response that says no. Another time you might get out of here, or, hello, go away, or, even a name. But that, and that's where people think that you can't use the scientific method because they're all different responses. And it's not so much that they're different responses, it's that you got a response. And that's the whole thing. I mean, if you think about it, if you're, I'm only bringing this up because, I mean, I know it was several years ago, but when my son was in, when my son was in school, he was doing a plant experiment. So it was one of those things where, of course, it wasn't so much what kind of plant was growing. It was more or less, okay, we have 2 plants. We watered this one. We didn't water that one. The watering worked. This one didn't. Similar thing with the paranormal field. And just definitely something we can do. And we can definitely, like I said, I'm saying definitely a lot because I'm like completely losing my train of thought here. But we can use the scientific experiment for a whole bunch of different things. And one example I'll talk about, actually, I just got notification that my guests are backstage. But let me talk about one thing real quick before we take a commercial break and I bring them on. One thing I always tell people, if you're new in the paranormal field, this will help you with learning more about how to use the Eddie Plus. But take 30 days and put the Eddie Plus in the same location on your back patio, unless it's raining, but try to find the same place you can put it in the same location where it's safe. Leave it there for an hour and mark down when you do it, the weather, the moon phase, and then chart the readings and, geothermal and, the location, if you can get a GPS location on where it's at, do all of that. And then watch the progress over 30 days. And kind of notate any things that might have changed, like were people outside, and go from there. And I always tell people to look closely at the biggest thing to look closely at is the EMF detection based on the full moon. And just kind of, it gets you in practice of not only documenting everything properly, but also going through and seeing how different things can affect everything that the Eddie Plus documents. So I know that's a little early, but hopefully, Todd, you're back there ready with the commercial break. But when we come back, I will have Chris and Anson from Anubis Paranormal joining us to discuss all of their paranormal experiences and everything. So we'll see you guys in just a few moments. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Really quick before we go on, when we were talking about ghosts not giving us the same answers, Courtney commented, I can't even get the same answer out of my kids, and that is so perfect. That is the exact same thing that happens with spirits when we're trying to deal with spirit activity. So I do want to welcome Anubis Paranormal to the show, Chris and Anson. I've had Chris on before, and definitely always a great interview. Love talking to Chris. And, let's get them on the show. I know Chris dropped out. Up there he is. I know he had dropped out for a little bit and he was supposed to come back. Hello, guys. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm getting some strange feedback. With me, I can't ever do that.
Well, I'm glad you guys are here. And Chris, was it you that I saw that had surgery or had a procedure done? Or I might have messaged the wrong person saying, I hope you feel better.
No, that'd have been Chris.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I was talking before you guys came on.
No,
it
was me. I broke my ankle back 2 weeks ago Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Sorry to hear about that, but hopefully you're recovering. Yeah. So anyway, real quick before we get started, I
got pins in my foot and all sorts of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of a delay with Chris, so but that's okay. We always work through things, and kind of want to find out how you guys got started in the paranormal before we start diving into the different questions.
Okay. Well, maybe he'll join us. Can you hear me fine?
I can hear you fine. Yeah, trust me, it happens. I've had it happen to me when I'm on.
Yeah,
on shows.
it seems like it never fails. We always have some sort of interruption every podcast we go on, whether it's me or Chris. One of us has it. I guess I'll start. I actually was a diehard.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
A lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try to relog in.
Okay.
I was actually a diehard skeptic for a lot of years. I worked night shift for a lot of different jobs. So I'd been in a lot of different places early in the mornings, late at night. Had seen a lot of things, a lot of interesting things, but always logicked them away. Mm-hmm. It gets to the point in a lot of people's lives, especially when they start seeing a lot of paranormal activity, that it gets to the point where you can't logic it away anymore. Things will happen or something will happen that kind of is that turning point. And I had a couple experiences like that where I couldn't logic them away. Mm-hmm. My wife and I actually started investigating several years ago on our own. It was just her and I, and then my oldest daughter joined us as well. And then I think probably about 2 or 3 years after that, we met up with Chris, and both of us joined Anubis Paranormal. And so we got our little bit of a foundation as far as investigating with them, and then moved on to bigger and better things. I wore a lot of different hats with APRO over the time I've been with them. I started out as an investigator. I was a tech person. I was an HR person. I was the Western Colorado director. I was the state of Colorado director, and then I got moved up to executive director. So, but I still take a very skeptical approach to the paranormal. I think I'm just kind of hardwired to think that way. Whereas my wife is very, very much a believer. She's always been a believer. But that's kind of how I got my start in it. I just kind of jumped in with both feet and started doing it. I did have an encounter with a malevolent entity several years ago. Being raised the way that I was raised in a Christian church, I never really believed in ghosts. It's kind of why I logicked them all away, but I always believed in the devil and demons. Mm-hmm. And having that encounter, I guess, reinforced that belief, but also reinforced the belief in the paranormal as well, that things can happen, that there is supernatural things out there that can do things beyond our understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's always the scary part, is we don't fully understand. And it's like, sometimes how do you fight back?
Yeah.
And that's when I was attacked once, I just stood up and started screaming at it like it was a 2-year-old.
Yeah. And it's hard because it's something that you're not prepared for. I mean, mm-hmm. A lot of times you don't see it coming, and what do? I mean, it's not a physical form that's, you really can't, there's ways of fighting back, but at that moment it's like, what do you really do? And that's where my job, what I do for APRO with being the demonologist for the area, when it comes to malevolent hauntings, is educating people for one, and helping people fight what they really can't see or what they really can't do anything about physically.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Are you there, Chris?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. I swear to goodness, Anson, you were a witness the other night.
Yep.
I can never, I swear, either the demons or the government or both combined, they do not like me speaking.
It's the spirits that follow you home. That's what
it's
I always
think. It's a conspiracy.
So Anson was talking a little bit about how he got into the paranormal and how he got involved in the APRO organization. Can you give a little bit more information on how you got started?
Well, gosh, that goes way back into the 60s when I was a child. And I must have been about 7 or 8. And that's when I had my first experience with what you would call the paranormal. Mm-hmm. I was asleep in my bed, and I woke up, and standing in the doorway, now this is about 2 or 3 in the morning, standing in the doorway was whom I thought was my father. And he was just a black silhouette, about the same structure as my dad. And I mean, I can see him still right in my mind today. And I started asking questions. Daddy, what are you doing? And there was never an answer. And then finally, I even went so far as to say, "Boo, Daddy, boo!" And the person, whatever it was, cocked its head, looked at me for about 30 more seconds, and then walked into the direction of my parents' room. Next morning, I asked my dad at breakfast, I says, "What were you doing standing at my door?" And he says, "What are you talking about, you crazy kid? I wasn't standing at your door." And I said, "Well, yeah, you were." And he says, "No, you weren't. You must have been sleeping." So a couple of nights later, the entity showed up again, this time with a friend. And I just kind of accepted it. And from there on, I had a UFO experience, possible abduction situation, saw Bigfoot, and so forth. And I had always been interested in it. Went to UCLA to their paranormal department, got a degree in parapsychology, joined a few groups, and then started APRO in 1996 with my son. And we have developed chapters all over the United States, and most currently Scotland and Japan. And now it looks like we're going to be opening up a chapter in Canada, if not more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, since the last time I talked to you, Japan and Canada are new, because you were talking about. Oh, you were actually talking about just opening up in Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're growing.
Exactly. Lee wants to know real quick. When did you see your Bigfoot?
I must have been about 9 or 10. We had gone camping up in a little town called Leadville, Colorado. And I got mad about something, I don't know, with my parents. And so I went down by this stream to get away from them and throw rocks and curse with my potty mouth, away from them. And so I'm throwing pebbles and rocks into the stream. And I hear this big kaboom and coming through the thicket of trees. And I looked across the bank, and I started at the feet and slowly worked my way higher and higher and higher and higher until I saw the face looming down at me, and it made a couple guttural noises. And I was more fascinated than anything else. I didn't know what this thing was. And it just looked at me and then kind of turned around and walked back into the brush. Now, as a park ranger, I've seen it a couple times, and in the backcountry and so forth. So I'm a true believer, but I don't believe it's a common creature. Mm-hmm. I truly am under the belief that it's an interdimensional creature.
Okay, cool. And I know it was funny. It's when you were talking the last time, you had mentioned that you ran into Peter Haviland on the Queen Mary. And right. I didn't even put two and two together. I was really good friends with Pete until he passed, and I dedicated my last book to him. And it was such an interesting connection when I put two and two together. I'm like, we're talking about the same person.
Yeah. He was a very dear man. Yes, not everything he would say I agreed with, but that made for good debate. Yeah. And he was a great mentor.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he was. Yeah, he took me under his wing, and he was on Ghost Education 101 with us quite a bit. He was one of our educators that helped us get that off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the greats, I'll tell you. I'm sure he's haunting the Queen Mary with the rest of them.
I'm sure he is.
Yeah. Well, actually, a couple times when I was on board, I could feel his presence very strongly. He loved that ship.
Yeah. Yeah, he talked about it every time we had him on the podcast. He was always talking about it. So, and one question after I had you on last time that a lot of people want to know more about is you guys do a kids program.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Can you share some more information on that and maybe how you guys decided to do that? Because I know a lot of people, my son was in the paranormal at 16 only because I was, but a lot of people say that they really shouldn't be involved.
Yeah. Anson, you want APRO, you want to take this one?
So the APRO Kids was actually kind of a brainchild of Chris, and it just so happens that I have a whole mess of kids that run around my house all the time. My daughter, like I said, got started with me. She was 9 or 10 when she got involved in the paranormal with me. Now she's the leader, the unofficial leader of the APRO kids. Most of the kids we have there we start out with my kids. We do have liaisons throughout different parts of the country that come in with paranormal news. But we started out just doing videos of them just watching paranormal footage and getting a kid's perspective on, is it real? Is it not? Is it plausible this is going on? What is it? Just different ideas, different theories that a lot of investigators talk about, but in a kid's perspective. Mm-hmm. And the last one that we're working on right now is a investigation that they did. They led the investigation on their own. I was there, obviously, running the camera and making sure things were going okay. But it was in a cemetery that we have right outside of our town that we use. APRO, we've used it for several times as a training area because we've gotten a lot of activity out of there. It seems like there's never a time that we've ever gone out there that we haven't gotten something. And the evidence that we get out there is pretty benign for the most part. So it's a good training area for them to go out and kind of learn those investigative skills in as controlled setting as we can get. Mm-hmm. As far as an area that we've investigated a lot, we know the spirits out there, we know what works and what doesn't, and being able to have a semi-controlled environment for them to train in. But the APRO Kids is just, it's a fun series. And basically it's just about educating children, and it's just getting that child's perspective on the paranormal and taking that fear factor away from the paranormal. Because as kids, I know my kids for a long time were scared of the paranormal, and it's turning that fear into curiosity and making it to where it's not scary, but instead of being scared of it, let's figure out why it's happening. So, and that's kind of where the brainchild came from.
Okay. Yeah. And it's funny. My son, he didn't believe in the paranormal. He was my skeptic. Mm-hmm. And until he had his first experience, of course, I always tease him because it happened in a bathroom. And it's always like, why are bathrooms haunted?
Right.
But now he's more curious. He has more questions than he ever had before. So it's kind of interesting how it's nice to talk to him about it. You know, I mean, and he's 19 now, so it's.
Well, most kids are fascinated by the paranormal to some degree, as it is. Mm-hmm. They watch the ghost stories, of course. What is it? Goosebumps, and read those shows. So they're inquisitive. We try to make the paranormal less scary than what it is. So we never put anybody in jeopardy. Right. But and we explain to them what's going on, and don't leave them, pardon the pun, in the dark. Mm-hmm. But it seems to be catching on quite quickly, because our group page for them has more requests to join than any of our other group pages. Yeah. So, I see 2 or 3 a day, and it's like, wow, I can't even get one for this other chapter. So darn. So.
Yeah. Definitely have to stay in contact with you guys, because I have a lot of people down here in Florida that are like, because I tell them, how to help their kids get through it. And I think that would be something that would be very beneficial down here. Yeah.
Well, again, when you think about parents being traumatized, children, just because they don't understand what the paranormal is, and maybe what the activity they're going through is very benign, but their understanding isn't. Right. But there's a lot of nasty critters out there in the ether that like to take advantage of children. Mm-hmm. So we definitely, those are the priorities that we always try to set for.
Well, I think the big thing with that is that paranormal is so mainstream all of a sudden. It's been mainstream for so many years now that there's a lot of, if kids have an interest in the paranormal, it's all over the place. It's on the internet, it's on television, it's in books, it's everywhere that you can find it. But there's a lot of really, really bad practices out there, as far as investigative practices, as far as what to use, how to use it, and one way or another, it's my takeaway on it is to teach to teach kids the correct way.
Yep.
If they want to get into the field, if they want to take that curiosity to another level, then they need to learn the correct way of doing it, the safe way of doing it, and not just going out and doing it the way that they feel is best or how they saw somebody on TV do it.
Right.
And that's always the best way to do it, is to teach them in an environment where they can learn the correct way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Something else I've noticed too is the fact that with especially girls, and no offense, but they become infatuated with the hosts of these TV shows. And it's this celebrity mentality that they think, well, maybe if I get into it, I can meet so-and-so or be on so-and-so's TV show.
Right.
So you got to kind of worm those individuals out and say, it's not about celebrity. It's not about TV shows. It's very serious science.
Yeah. And I tell people, because I get that asked all the time, how we got a documentary and how we did X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I just do my podcast. I have a blog, and we share information and help other people. I'm like, if you're going to be a celebrity, they're going to find you. Just do you, and they'll come to you if they want you.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Forcing the issue is not going to make it happen.
Yeah, the organization was approached 3 times to do a TV show. And I literally said, okay, I'm interested, but are you going to guarantee truth? Mm-hmm. If there isn't anything, we can be able to say there wasn't anything. I kind of put the stipulations down, and they basically came back with, well, you do know this is entertainment, and you do know we do have sponsors, and we've got to make it thrilling for the TV audience, because otherwise we'll lose interest. Mm-hmm. But, no, thanks. No, thanks. No, I'm not selling my soul to the devil for a few minutes of fame on TV. And now look at the controversies that are going on with a certain individual and his group. Mm-hmm. And it's coming back to bite him.
Yep. And not even just his group, it's other groups too. I've been hearing a lot of talk.
Well, people are tired of being treated like they're dumb.
Oh, that too.
Yeah. And lied to as well, because in essence, that's exactly what's happening.
Right.
And people, they watch these shows because they think it's real. Mm-hmm. And again, when you find out that your greatest crush isn't telling the truth to you, it's very detrimental.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I know when we filmed the documentary, that's what we said to them. And they had already filmed other paranormal documentaries, and they were really good, which is why we joined them. We had said we won't fake any evidence, but when we didn't get any activity in a location, because we went to several locations, we did the investigation, then they talked about the history, and then they would cut away to because I use fidget spinners. So after I was just doing an investigation with a fidget spinner, they showed the fidget spinner spinning as they faded to the next scene, but it wasn't really part of the investigation. Mm-hmm. So they kind of did a way of showing how the equipment worked without really saying. So
you manipulated very well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was done, good to where it wasn't, that we were faking it or that we were lying. So it was done really well. Right. And that's what TV's money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
And unfortunately, it does. It boils down to the almighty dollar, and they want their sponsors to make sure they like those shows. But there again, it's, this goes back to Ryan Buell. Oops, said his name. He was very, very big, and then he did what he did, and he fell from grace. And now he's trying to rebound from it, and it's been a very, very long battle. And now you've got this other group that is jealous of fame and fortune to another group or groups, and they're trying to manipulate the playing field. And it's come back, and their viewer attendance has dropped dramatically. I guess the museum in Las Vegas, which this individual owns, the attendance has dropped considerably again. So even though he may have millions of dollars, eventually those millions of dollars run out, especially at the amount he's spending.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel sorry for him because I always liked that individual. I knew him when he first started, and he was not like he turned out to be.
Right.
I had conversations with him. You're going down a dark path, buddy. You really need to stay true to form and stay with us instead of seeking the celebrity attitude. And, he slowly started to transgress.
Yep.
So I feel for him, definitely.
Yeah, and it's funny too because before all the drama happened, they had called me because they wanted to interview me about my book regarding a place they were, investigating. So we did a video chat that's supposed to be aired later this fall when they start their new season. And then, like 2 days later, all this drama hit, and I'm like, "Well, my show's not going to air."
Yeah, it's too bad too because there again. You really believe these people, and unfortunately, it just slaps you right down in the face.
Yep. Yeah, and I always tell people off camera, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He just does it for on camera for the show, but that's not always the best thing either.
No, because it's bullying, and it's shown as bullying.
Yep.
And in today's day and time, nobody likes a bully.
Mm-hmm.
And those are a lot of the comments that I get when I post something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, I mean, talking about that, I know I try not to be involved in it, but I always get sucked into it somehow. But have you guys had to deal with paranormal with your team or?
Oh, yes. Yes. Para-unity is a wonderful concept, but a lot of people don't practice it. The one thing that APRO really does stand for is integrity. And we do what we say we're going to do, and we don't put out anything that we don't wholeheartedly believe in. And that comes from a very personal level. It comes from my personal moral compass. That comes from Chris's moral compass. And, we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And we're going to only put out evidence that we know is paranormal because we've exhausted all other options. And there's a lot of people that don't like that. And there's a lot of local paranormal groups, that have taken things pretty personal at times. We've extended olive branches out to all the groups, and it just happens. And it's one of those things that, you just have to keep moving forward and keep advancing. But there's plenty of drama in the paranormal, especially for when you have a group that has a high level of integrity, and you have, a few number of groups out there that the integrity system isn't, or the integrity level isn't as high. But, we try to play as best we can with everybody, and we try to educate as much as we can. And, that was one thing that Chris and I talked about on a previous podcast. With APRO, you don't have to be a part of APRO in order to fly under that particular flag, so to speak. We will take in other groups, and if they just want to be an affiliate of us, and that hurt a lot of people's feelings too. Well, it's just the way we do things. We try to do the best we can by people, and at the end of the day, we're here for the science. We're here to help the living and the dead. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's what we're here for. And if that ruffles people's feathers, it ruffles people's feathers. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of it has to do with jealousy. We don't really try and say, "Hey, look at APRO. Isn't it the greatest thing?" No, they come to us. Just like with this Canada situation, I've had two individuals so far come to us and say, "Hey, I'd love to start a chapter. We've heard great things about you." And it's because, just like Anson says, we have integrity. We have values that are set into place. And for most, and I'm not saying everyone, but for most, the hobbyist, shall we say, is in it. Well, let's go out Saturday night to a place and have some fun and investigate. Mm-hmm. That's not science.
Well,
that's
we've lost a lot of local investigations due to people doing that. Mm-hmm. We have an area out here that Chris and I have been trying to get into for a very long time that has a lot of history behind it. And getting in touch with the people that own it, we can't get into it. It's not the fact that they don't like us or don't like our organization. It's the fact that it was either last year or the year before during Halloween, they had somebody actually physically break into the building and were charging people haunted tours in a building that they broke into. They weren't even legally allowed to be in there.
Yeah.
And those type of situations are in it for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And now having an actual team come in that is going to do it the correct way and is trying to go through the correct measures to get in there, it's kind of closed off to all investigators now because of the one group that wanted to do things incorrectly.
Yeah, that was our when I lived in Vegas before moving back to Florida, that was our biggest challenge because of the individual we were talking about earlier. Kind of closed the door for a lot of places in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
No, really?
It was either that or my favorite one is, you can come for $5,000 for 4 hours because
we've had that. We've had that before. We've had people, we've had places. Well, we'd love for you to come out, but it's going to be X amount of hundreds or thousands of dollars to come out here for a night. Well, you realize we're a nonprofit, right? We don't charge anybody to do this, so we're completely free. So we'll have to pass on that one for right now.
Yep. Yeah. No, I like working with the venues that realize the value in it, and you don't.
And it's the problem is, yeah. Well, the biggest problem too. You look at some of these larger locations; they realize the money they can make, and so it's become a three-ring circus. Not most, but there is a few groups out there that's their whole sole purpose is to sell tours.
Yep.
And then they get upset because the spirit activity or whatever activity is nil.
Drops off.
Well, if I was a spirit there, I'd say to heck with you. You were here just the other day. I'm not going to put on a dog and pony show for you. You get out of my home. And that's why you get a lot of these EVPs. Cut out.
It's interesting, but I like I was saying, I did work with a few locations out in Vegas that 100% of the ticket sales, and the only thing we kept was whatever our expenses were.
Yeah, and that's the best way.
Yeah, like if we had to pay for a ticket platform to sell the tickets, or if we bought lunch, or brought in food or whatever, and then the venue got the rest of it.
Right. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. Sometimes, in general, APRO will hold fundraisers and things like that and give all the donations. And we'll do tours, location sites, and so forth. And then all the money will go to that organization like pet sanctuaries, children's hospitals, and so forth. So we're big into that.
That's good. And getting back to the para-unity, I do agree. It's a great concept in theory.
Yeah.
But the one thing I don't get is, and then on the opposite spectrum of people not getting along is you have those that say you need to support us no matter what because we believe in para-unity. I'm not going to support a group or an organization that I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
So just because you say you're a paranormal investigator doesn't mean you have my support.
Yeah.
Well, and there again, it's kind of like the phrasing of ghost hunter versus paranormal investigator. We're not ghost hunters because we don't, go out like Elmer Fudd looking for a ghost. We're into it for the science. And so, but there are a lot of people out there. Again, usually it's the mainstream word is hobbyist that'll call themselves ghost hunters. And of course, Ghostbusters, great show. Anson's a big fan. His children are big fans, but it kind of gives that mentality. And when you look at it like Peter Bickman as the scientist is our kind of version, people say, well, where's the fun in this? And you go, well, the fun is in doing the science. Yeah. And trying to prove or disprove that something's going on. And of course, we cover the three facets of paranormal activity, be it hauntings, be it UFO encounters, be it cryptids. Those are our three primary investigative sites. And not many do that.
Well, we've had trainings. I can't remember that last big training that we did when we were training some new investigators out at the cemetery. We had that group that I took out, and it was real quiet and not much was going on. So it was still fairly early. I think it was only about 8 or 9 o'clock out. And I'll always remember that one person. really wish something would happen. I wonder when it's going to start happening. I don't know. The ghost didn't RSVP. I don't know. This is ghost hunting. This is paranormal investigation 101 right here. Is a lot of times you spend a lot of time talking to nothing,
right,
and hoping for a response. And that's the way it is. It's not always thrills and running around and having things happen and things moving. That's not the way it works.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, the paranormal activity is set to start at midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. We have a couple more hours and then the ghost will come out. That's when they say
Right.
they're real close.
Go have a cookie. But it's true. Most of the time when I was very active in field investigation, you can sit in a room for hours and not have anything happen.
Yep.
Or you can be sitting in that room for just a few minutes and all heck breaks loose.
Yep.
So again, it just depends on the site, the location, and the timing.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently put out a kind of a cartoon figure of a ghost going, ooh, and I said, why do ghosts try to scare people? And I put under the caption, because they can. They're probably having a great time scaring people, just like we would.
I know I would.
Yeah. I just imagine sometimes them all getting together after they scared the holy bejeebies out of everybody, and they get together and start laughing as a group, saying, we did it. Yeah, boy, did you see the face on that one when we scared them out of them? And that's because of the human aspect of what we look at as spirit. I actually had a case where that was the situation, where the spirit was having a blast scaring this young woman. And we finally moved him on, but his remarks were, oh man, I have had such a good time. And he crossed over, but it shows the human aspect that still remains.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We were actually investigating a location, and we were helping the employees because it was a haunted location, and the owner wanted us to take the employees around so they weren't so scared of the paranormal activity happening there.
Yeah.
And so we were in one location, and it was a location where it was a former mob hangout.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden my butt was grabbed, and like two other people, and forcefully grabbed. And,
Ooh.
I finally yelled, who's grabbing our butts? And we have an EVP that was me. And we're like, someone's having fun.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to treat it like that. And in most cases, they're very benign. And then it's a very, very, very small percentage that it comes into the realm of diabolical or demonic. And APRO has that set in place. As for Anson, he's my lead demonologist. And but all the other chapters, when we put the teams together, we have set roles, and each one of them has a demonologist for that chapter, as well as a tech person, investigators, historians. So we're broken down to a very finite group in each case.
Yep.
And I think that's the best way to do it. They're all investigators to a point, but each have roles that they must play.
Yeah, exactly. I had something in my brain that I just kind of lost. Okay. So do you guys do, I know a lot of groups do the events like we were talking about, and then other groups focus on doing residentials. Do you guys, I know I've taken a break from residentials because of a heartbreaking case, and I needed to get my mind back in order before I took on another client. But do you guys do residential cases as well?
Yeah. Yep.
You want to take this one?
We do. We cover all aspects of it. Residential cases is definitely something that I personally have a calling for. I like helping the individual instead of going to the coolest paranormal hotspot. And that's something that Chris and I have been talking about for a long time. Is looking for the places that aren't on the map. Aren't looking for the places that are on the map and going to the same place that's been investigated 100,000 times. And so that's been the big push for the Colorado chapter for sure, is trying to find the untold areas, the areas that people don't really know about. But residential cases are definitely, I have a real strong connection to residential cases. Cause like I said, I had a diabolical case in my own home, and we didn't have anybody really out here that could handle something like that. And so that was a lot of trial and error on my part, and a lot of trial and error on people that I trusted that could come in and help. But there was nobody really out there that could do anything with it.
Yeah.
And so that holds a certain spot in my heart is to help families and to help people that are living with it day in and day out. So residential cases are definitely something that I really take a real strong look at most of the time. And we have a couple that are coming up now. So
Okay.
Especially if we get cases with children.
Yeah.
That's always a priority, no matter what. We drop everything and deal with those because, again, children can be so traumatized and it will last with them forever. I mean, the memories I have as a child are as fresh today as they were when it occurred. So you've got to really, really pay attention to that. And of course, believe your children. If they say that they've got Mr. Oogie Boogie in the closet and they're best friends with Mr. Oogie Boogie, you better check and make sure that imaginary friend is just that, imaginary, or if it's a spirit or entity trying to either influence or befriend that child.
Yeah, and that's what Leigh had said earlier. I meant to bring it up, but I completely forgot. She's like, and make sure you believe the children when they tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
They're experiencing something. Yeah, and
Right.
so kind of segueing off of that is the case that got me to kind of step away from doing residential cases for a little bit was an elderly woman in her late 70s was experiencing paranormal activity. And I mean, to the point where she even had this big map drawn out of everything that was happening to her. She drew the figure and was 100% dead set. Two investigations later, no paranormal activity coming out of the house and, nothing. And we even had psychics talk to her and there was still, nothing. And 2 cleansings later, she was still having activity.
Yeah.
And we told her that we didn't get any evidence and that there was nothing that we could do after that point. And, poor woman was crying on the phone, I'm not crazy. And that just broke my heart. that broke my heart. How do you guys handle it? Or if you guys even had it, but how do you handle it if someone doesn't have any evidence of paranormal activity?
Well, in our case, the golden rule is there's 3 stages. The first, of course, is do a preliminary investigation. And how we do it is we've got a set standard form. We sit down with them and we go over the questions. Now, in reality, that form is a psychological evaluation. And, several of the questions are asked just in a different manner, but to see the consistency. Now, the rule of thumb, too, is believe every person you encounter until you can verify that it isn't what it is. Because these individuals are traumatized and they don't understand what is happening to them, why it's happening to them, and so on. And so we go in very sympathetic. We go in very understanding. We do a preliminary base study on what's going on. And if required, we'll do a full investigation. But we never leave them hanging. And we don't say, okay, we checked everything. We're out the door now. Hope everything goes well. No, we do rechecks. We'll go back. And a lot of times this occurs, especially in a very diabolical investigation. They'll lay low. They want you to believe that this person is nuts and not to believe her so that you leave or him or whoever. And but if we start to think that something's happening, then we'll go to the religious element. And where our pay grade isn't that high. So we have religious individuals from all faiths that we can contact and have them come in, do blessings and so on. And then we'll just keep monitoring.
Yeah, and with her, that's what I did is I kept monitoring it. I checked in with her every 2 weeks, told her I was there if she ever needed me to call me, if the activity came back. And we chatted for a couple months, and then all of a sudden she stopped responding.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't know what happened.
We've had that happen a few times where we've had people come in dire straits saying something was going on, and then we talk to them for a long time, and then they fall off. And it's, I don't know if they start to kind of just accept it or what goes on in their mind to stop. But I wholeheartedly agree with Chris on what he explained is, we always try to keep in contact with everybody, even if it's something that we spent a long time on and can't find evidence to support their claims. We're still going to keep in contact with them because, like he said, there's something going on that's creating that fear. And whether it's psychological or not, whether it's paranormal or whether it's something that we can explain, we'll still keep in contact with them, because just having somebody there that can either validate what's going on or give them that peace of mind saying, look, this is what's going on. We understand, but this is what we're finding. And being able to give them that validation to say, look, you're not crazy. There is something, but it's not paranormal, or it may be paranormal. We just need to find more.
Yeah. And it's tough because their pain is real.
Yes, it is.
Even though we can't see it, what they're going through is real. And that was the hardest part, was knowing she was hurting and that there was not much we could do outside of be there for her.
Right.
And that's the hardest thing.
Well, whenever you look into the faces of individuals that are suffering from something like this, it draws you in. You want to be a help. You want to be that shoulder to cry on, because it has upset their lives in a manner that, again, will probably follow them for the rest of their lives. And they'll never be the same. And that's the real true dark side of the paranormal. It may be benign, but you're walking in a whole complete reality that's different from our own. And we're so used to walking down this white line that divides the normal from the paranormal that we put blinders on to some of the situations. And it's always like, well, where did I put my keys? And you tear up the house, and then you go back and look at the original spot, and there's the keys.
Yeah.
Well, I must have just imagined it. I must have just looked and didn't even realize. You try to rationalize this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it comes to a point that you can't rationalize it after a while. You have to admit that there's something going on. I mean, we all have it. Every single person, every single day, has something that they really can't put their finger on, or why it happened. But again, we just brush it off.
Right, exactly. And then Courtney has a quick question. She says, what's the best way to cleanse yourself after you move out the haunted residence?
Man, that's with what I do for APRO, I tend to lean more on the religious aspect of things. I tend to fall more on the Catholic side of how to cleanse yourself or how to bless yourself. If I'm moving into a different house, I like to have a priest come out and bless the home before we even set foot in living in it. Before we start moving stuff in, is bless the home.
Yeah.
Coming out of it, I'm also a big fan of sage. I'm a big fan of Palo Santo wood. I'm a big fan of the biggest thing that you got to look at as far as cleansing yourself is, what do you have faith in? What is your faith? Because your faith is going to be the strongest thing. So if you believe in white sage is going to cleanse you, go with that. If you believe having a priest come over and bless you and bless your home, go with that. Because ultimately your faith is what's going to matter in that situation. And it's not going to be necessarily a recipe for this is specifically how you need to do it, and this is going to work every time, because things that are tried and true sometimes don't work.
Right.
So it's what your faith or what you believe is going to work is going to be the strongest, because that's going to hold more it's going to be more personal to you at that point.
And in most cases, when we get
blessed oil, blessed salt, I use all of it. I have all of it in my home. I keep all of it ready all the time.
Right. And before we do an investigation, I always have the team members call upon whatever deity they believe in, say a silent prayer to that deity. And then I have holy water that I sprinkle on each of them before and after an investigation. And again, the forceful, you stay here. You do not follow us. You are not welcome. You must stay. You take charge of the situation. And that is key and paramount. Now, there's other ways. A lot of people that I know of will take holy water, take a bath, put the holy water, just a few drops into the reservoir of the water, and lay in that and cleanse themselves for about 30 minutes. And then afterwards, they just focus on cleansing, and that helps. So again, you can use varied methods, whatever is the strongest with your belief system.
Yep. Yeah, I know what I use is marjoram, thyme, and mixtured with what's the third? I have the recipe somewhere, but I always have a big jar of it next to my tub, and it's also with Epsom salt, and that's what I bathe in, and that helps a lot. And then Lee also brought up, she says she's now a fan of cascarilla, and that's what I use when I cleanse the homes, to help, in that aspect. And a lot of people like that. So, and again, it goes back to their different beliefs.
Exactly. Well, if you had say, for instance, a Native American family, very, very deeply in their traditional elements, and you say, "Oh yeah, we can help. We can bring in a religious person," and you bring in a Buddhist monk, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
You need to bring in a Native American shaman
Yep.
that they have strong ties with. And that bonded belief system is what can drive a dark element out.
Yeah. We actually had that on a case. The rest of the team went in, and it started because the daughter was believing in, witchcraft and pagan, and she was, dabbling in it. And that's what kind of started the activity, because she didn't know what she was doing. But the rest of the team was Catholic or Christian, I think, and they just didn't know how to do it. And so they brought me in the next time, and we got, a lot of activity. We got actual answers. We cleansed the house, and the activity slowed down.
Well, and that's something that Chris had mentioned it before, is we do have religious elements that do help us out. But we also have people that we can use as consultants that are more well-versed than I'll ever be in paganism, witchcraft. Because you need people like that. You need people to get on certain levels that can understand what you would take me months, if not years, to understand. Right. I do read about the, part of being demonologist. I do research a lot of demon lore. I research a lot of, occult practices, witchcraft, Satanism, even, the religious side of it. But, there's things that are going to come up that I don't have a clue on what it is. And so you have to have that person that truly understands what's going on.
Yep. Yeah. And that's one thing that I always explain is, even if it's, research as much as you can, because you don't want to dedicate too much time, because you need to take care of other things too. But we used to investigate a location that was built on top of an old Mormon fort. So I did a deep dive and fell down that rabbit hole, and I watched every documentary on the FLDS, read everything I could on it. And every time we would investigate, I was able to come up with questions that got answers.
Sure.
Because I was talking, understanding what these people went through.
Yeah.
And that helps as well.
Well, again, it's that connection. It brings you, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but it's a connection where you're not going in blindsided. You have that aspect in order to determine, again, that the scratching on the wall isn't a rat behind the wall. It's something else. And you can even connect with some of the spirit before you even encounter them. And ask the questions to determine if that is the spirit indeed that is at that location. So, we believe wholeheartedly in historical research. And it's valid and varying. And, of course, in documentation, you've got all of your X's marked. You've got all of your I's dotted, your T's crossed. Because, again, should this actually become a solid scientific practice, for lack of a better word, you're ahead of the game because you took the time to have all of the documentation presentable. And it also adheres to your credibility. You can say, oh, you want to see our files? Here you go. We have nothing to hide. The photos are not faked. The sound bits are not faked. And here's the documentation, the history, the summary, all of the technical, the weather parameters, the whole market is in our forms. And we have a huge database that we share with the other chapters should they need it. But for each location, they have a specific database.
And that's how it should be. I mean, we need to be sharing information more often. I know a friend of mine here in Florida, he started the International Bureau of Paranormal Research. And what it was is he had, and it wasn't even that expensive to be a part of it. It was like $25 and you got access to this database where in theory, everybody was supposed to follow the same format, the same form. So that way they could cross-check things, and only 2 people joined.
Larry Lawson.
Yes, I love Larry.
He and I have been friends for many years, and he's very dedicated.
Yes,
and he's starting to make a name for himself too, and I'm glad of it.
Yep, Yeah, I actually just put him in contact with my publisher to publish a book. So hopefully that goes through. My publisher said he's trying. He's reaching out to the publication board that is at the press. So
that's wonderful.
So
that is
hopefully
wonderful.
That helps. But yeah, Larry, it was funny. I've known Larry.
Okay.
My oldest is 25, and he was in Boy Scouts. So since kindergarten, since my son was in kindergarten, I've known Larry, and we didn't even put 2 and 2 together that we were both into the paranormal. Until one day, my mom said, "Hey, did you know Larry does X, Y, and Z?" And I'm like, "No," and I'm like, "I need to talk to Larry."
Yeah. No, he's always been a great guy, and I really like Larry. You know, it's good to have those contacts and those interactions with others, because there again, the ones that you're doing it with are the ones that are truly devoted to the research and the science. And you know, I've got a couple like that I feel very close to, and you know, I consider them part of the APRO family. And it sometimes is sad that you can still have a falling out. He and I had a little bit of a difference, and it did not by fault of anybody. It was one of our team that kind of screwed us over, but it still had residual situations and kind of, you know, put a little bit of a damper. But I consider Larry still a very high professional, very good friend, and I'm going to continue to think that way. And but again, it's just like with any friends, you do get your feelings hurt sometimes, and you just got to get over it and move on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm looking forward to. Right now, we're about 2.5 hours away from him, but my parents live, you know, down the road from him. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that part of Florida, so that way I can work more closely with him than just via video chat.
Sure, no kidding. Yeah, well, that's great. I'm glad he is writing a book. In fact, I have had a guest on both originally and then also with Anson that is interested in writing my park ranger stories.
Oh, yeah. Those would be great stories. You told me some of them, and that would be great stories.
So getting there on that as well. But I got to get better first. I got to get through all these hurdles that I've gone through.
And real quick, Philomena, thank you for joining. And Philomena, I'll be giving more information about her later in this show. She will be joining me next week with the Hatman Project discussion that we'll be having. But she wants to know if either of you had any experience with the Hatman.
I personally have not. I've heard of the entity before. I personally haven't had any experiences with them. I do have an interest in that, but I haven't had any experience with it yet. So
the closest I've had was I was at this very, very luxurious condominium complex, and I was talking to an individual there, and they had this big, beautiful 4A, and it was all in Grecian style. But I mean, this place, a condo, there was $1 million+ to buy this condo, which they usually only used during the winter, you know, the rich and the elite. And I was standing there talking to him. Now, this ironically happened during the daytime. It wasn't at night. And I'm talking to him. He's got his, you know, he's facing me, but behind him is this pillar. And all of a sudden, I see this black arm reach out and around this pillar. And then all of a sudden, this head hopped out and peeked at me. And then it slowly went back. And then the arm slowly went back again. Now, I did not blink during this whole thing. And I asked my friend, would you go over to that pillar and look around it and tell me if you see anything? And so he did. And of course, there wasn't anything. But this thing was as black as coal. Couldn't see through it. It almost looked like a black liquid. But it definitely had a distinctive arm and a distinctive head and shoulders. And it was peeking at me. So that's about the closest I've had to shadow people.
Okay. Cool. I'm looking forward to next week's show because I have a ton of questions. I've never encountered it, but I have a ton of questions about it. And so talking about different entities, I know you had mentioned earlier that you had a Bigfoot encounter. Have you guys had any recent Bigfoot investigations that you guys have had to go on?
The Nebraska chapter had one not too long ago. Florida, of course, is a hot spot.
Yeah. Who'd think that?
Texas. Yeah, Texas has had a few, especially in the eastern part. But for us, we have a lot of reports here in Colorado. We've had a couple people on our podcast that have discussed it. Okay. And it's very predominant, but it's one of those, again, that from basic studies, we're gathering more scientific aspects. It appears that in some of these cases that Bigfoot sightings, and if you have an EMF device on hand, it'll affect the EMF. And that's a big question as to why is that occurring. Right. So there again, is it dimensional? Is the creature able to cloak itself? Or is there something else involved in the paranormal aspect? So Bigfoot continues to be a large interest. But now that we have our operations in Scotland, our director and his team are going to be from Aberdeenshire, Scotland, which is very close to Loch Ness as well. And in fact, just recently, there was a couple Bigfoot sightings at Loch Ness. So it's not just in the U.S. It's predominantly starting to be seen across the world.
Yeah, definitely would love to get to Loch Ness.
Oh, yes.
That would be one. I mean, you get everything there. Ghost, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster. You get everything there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a hot spot, an absolute hot spot, and we're thrilled to be there. Yeah. And then another place we'd love to get started is in York, England, because that whole community is a hotbed. And so we're working on that as well, possibly Transylvania, aka Romania. And, so it's we're getting into some of the areas that a lot of places don't go. And that's the joy of it, because we're able to kind of pick and choose our sightings. And of course, your traditionalism is going to be completely different than, say, that of Japan or the US or Scotland and so on. There may be similarities, but the whole demographics is going to be completely different.
Yeah, exactly. And because even like in Vegas, we had a couple locations that we had to sign NDAs on, because they didn't want the public to know that they were haunted, because Japanese culture is they don't go into a building if it's believed to be haunted.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they didn't
want to we're having problems with.
Yeah. I would say our Japan chapter is by the hardest one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you guys
we've got a great director there.
Yeah. I was going to say, for Bigfoot sightings, you guys need to get to the Florida Everglades. That's where most of them that I've heard.
Well, I worked down in the Florida Everglades.
Okay.
As a ranger. And I've got a lot of stories about that location. And it's my belief that, they always talk about the Bermuda Triangle.
Yep.
I believe the Bermuda Triangle goes in a lot farther than happens in the Everglades as a part of that.
Yeah.
And, because I've had situations of sighting cryptids. I've had UFO sightings there. And a very, very, very strong possibility of myself entering an alternative dimension. And that, to this day, still makes me wonder what happened. And just a brief synopsis, I was on the back trails, and I was in radio contact. And of course, you have boardwalks everywhere. And so I was checking, I was looking for, the park was getting ready to close up. And so you got to go into the back areas and shoo everybody out of the park. And I went down this one path, and there was a canopy of different plants and vines and so on. And so I didn't remember ever seeing it before, but I didn't think much of it. And so as I walked through the canopy, I started getting like this electrical tingling all over me. And I walked out onto the other side, and I stopped because everything looked different. The sky looked different. It was a more paler blue, almost like a crystal blue. The sun was more intense. The water was absolutely clear. And if you go to the Everglades, it's always kind of a brackish color.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But this was almost crystal clear. And there were plants there that I could not identify with. Now, there were some that I, of course, could. But I got on the radio, and it was complete dead silence. And I kept trying, and I kept trying. And I walked down this boardwalk a little while, and something told me, don't go farther. And so I turned around, and I went back. And as I went through the canopy, I got that feeling again. And as soon as I exited, my radio came back on. And I called in and I says, hey guys, I'm on my way back. I said, I'm not sure if I just had a stroke, heat stroke, or what, but I just had a very strange experience. Mm-hmm. And I went back and I sat there and I was just kind of dumbfounded by what had just happened. And I tried to find that canopy again, and I never could.
It's so probably a moving thing.
Yeah, the Everglades, it does. It has its moments.
Yeah. Okay. And Philomena wants to know, have you noticed an uptick in paranormal activity that your group studies since 1995? Since the discovery of the top quark, she said that they've noticed in their Hetman research an uptick in sightings since then.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There's been an uptick. There was an uptick in residential hauntings or claims of residential hauntings since 2020. And a lot of that has been associated with people being home due to COVID.
Right.
But there was a massive uptick even just a couple of years ago in residential hauntings. Just strictly people are home more and start to realize things that they didn't realize about their home because they have a normal job and are gone the vast majority of the time. Having said that, there's actually an uptick of diabolical incidents nowadays. So much so that the last several years, and Chris can speak more on this than probably I can, but so much so that the Vatican has actually opened up training in exorcisms to the general layman instead of now priests. Mm-hmm. So there's been a massive uptick in, I would say, the vast majority of anything paranormal, cryptid sightings included, UFO sightings, but especially paranormal. And I don't know if that's more because we're more aware. I think there's a lot of reasoning behind that. I think now we're, as of several years ago, she said 1995, you think about now, we're probably the most surveyed that as we've ever been, with everybody having, low cost security cameras on your phone, cameras on street corners, cameras on anything that you can think of. You have surveillance on stuff that we normally didn't have surveillance on 24 hours a day. And so the uptake of paranormal, it's being caught a lot more. So I think people are necessarily more, I think there's probably an uptick, but I think at the same time, people are more aware of it now too, because of the constant surveillance that we live in.
Well, and people are also very fascinated by it. Look at the movies now. You've got the Pope's Exorcist. You had what's the three trilogy movie there, Anson?
The Conjuring.
The Conjuring movies, which are extremely successful. And now they're coming out with a new Exorcist. So you look 100 years ago in the early 1900s, what was the big thing? Was spiritualism. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be on a cycle. It's occurring again, except this time we're more technically advanced than we were 100 years ago. And unfortunately, it glamorizes the paranormal. And so you get these influential kids or the ones that can be influenced by what they're seeing and think, oh, wow, this is cool. I really want to try this. Let's get a Ouija board and see if we can conjure a ghost or a demon.
Mhm.
They do not see that they are opening Pandora's box.
Yep.
And in a lot of cases, when you, even on YouTube videos, they'll explain, okay, let's get the Ouija board out. And then all of a sudden the problems just skyrocket.
Mhm.
And it's like, you fools, do your homework. If you don't believe it, fine. Now, technically and logically, that Ouija board is nothing but a board with a piece of plastic.
Mhm.
But it's not the board or the planchette. It's the intention of focus, a mental focus, spiritual focus into that board that opens that gateway.
Mhm.
And if you're not trained on how to do that, that little door turns into a gaping cave, and God knows what can come out of it.
Mhm.
Anything that's trying to find release.
Yep.
And it's dangerous regardless. And even with technology like what we're doing now, electronics are becoming a gateway to these entities. I mean, right now we're talking about them.
Right.
And in the ether, who's to say that they're not listening, especially people like us and you, Heather, who have been doing it, and it's a part of our lives.
Yep.
And we always, in every one of our videos, we put in a disclaimer, because it does seem that, for instance, like Anson was saying, during the COVID, people were watching what? They were watching the paranormal shows. And then all of a sudden, the activity in their homes jumped.
Right.
Well, it's because they're focusing again on what's going on in the TV. And we all know that spirit can manipulate electronics. So you've got to know the risks. And if you don't, you should not be in this field.
Right. Yeah. I always tell people that a Ouija board is no different than an EVP session.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
No, I've said that. I think I said that on one of our podcasts that we were on. Is you take like a spirit box. A spirit
Mhm.
box is no different than a Ouija board.
Right.
It's just a more technologically advanced Ouija board at that point.
Yep.
But you're still opening a doorway. Paranormal investigation, in a sense, you're still opening that doorway because you're showing vulnerability. You're showing openness
Mhm.
to spirits, and so you have to learn to guard yourself to the paranormal as much as you want to have the experience, as much as you want to make that communication or that connection with them. You still have to be able to have those safeguards in place. And just like Chris said, one of the things I've collected for a long time, I collect Ouija boards. I have some from as early as, I think, 1930s, 1940s, somewhere in there.
Mhm.
And it's just a board. And if you treat it as a board, it's just a board. But, and I have no problem, displaying them or keeping them in my home, because at that point, it's just a board. I don't use them. But using a spirit box in a cemetery is the same thing as using a Ouija board in a cemetery. It still opens that doorway.
Mhm.
And even the most experienced individuals who do research, and myself included in this, can be harmed.
Mhm.
And, I believe I discussed in our last interview, Heather,
Mhm.
that I was physically attacked by something that we believe was demonic in nature. And it tried to kill me 4 times.
Mhm.
And I mean, seriously. But for whatever reason, I was brought back and to continue the fight. But to this day, I thought I was doing extremely well. I was in the last part of the hurdle of my injuries, and it'll be 3 years that this started on the 11th.
Mhm.
And on Easter Sunday, I got very dizzy. My legs buckled. I went down and I fractured my ankle to the point where my ankle bone had dislocated and was poking through the skin. And it was so bad that the doctors even joked about it, that if they raised my foot into place and removed their hand, my foot would completely turn about 80 degrees in the opposite direction because it tore the tendons as well. So I've had to deal with that. And again, it's like, okay, is this now? I'm not saying it was diabolical in nature, but with all the other things that I've gone through, it makes you wonder if it's not still somehow trying to affect me. Because I did the biggest no-no was I tried to bless the location and get it taken care of, and I was the leader of the team.
Yep.
And even Anson was affected by it too. All of our team members were affected in some ways. So even though you know what to look for, sometimes it'll slip through.
Yep. They're sneaky that way.
Yes, they are.
And getting back to the COVID real quick, during that time with the uptick, one thing we noticed was that a lot of it was thought forms and self-manifestation because they were watching the TV shows.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and I was just looking at the comments. That was one thing that they were talking about with social media. That's something that we've seen, that I think any paranormal investigator has seen, is upticks of, and Chris and I have had a conversation about this for quite a while now, is fears of certain things manifesting themselves into a physical form. Case in point with social media, you look at Slender Man. Slender Man was an internet or social media created cryptid, and then all of a sudden, a few years later, people start having sightings of Slender Man. Now, is this legitimate? I don't know. I've never had a Slender Man encounter. I don't know. But is the fear or what we're seeing or what we're believing in manifesting itself into a physical form?
Right.
But I honestly believe with what you're saying. I do agree with that. And I do, that's why, everything that we've ever posted, as far as videos and such things, is we do put warnings on them saying, there has been pretty good theories and there's been pretty good evidence to suggest that watching paranormal activity or watching it or experiencing on, via video can have an effect in your personal life. You can have paranormal activity in your home by watching paranormal activity on TV.
Yeah, and I know the Philip experiment in Canada is a popular one where they talked about Philip, who never existed, and then all of a sudden they started interacting with an entity claiming to be Philip.
Yep.
That's one that I still try to dive into that a little bit more and get more information on that one, because that's an interesting case.
And again, it's taken the line taken from a famous movie. It knows what scares you. Yeah. And of course it's going to feed, especially if it's like a non-human entity, in order to feed on the fear factor, which is one of the strongest emotional energies. And that's the whole purpose, is to make it stronger.
Well, and that's something that you see with a lot of diabolical huntings, is you see a diabolical entity come in, a non-human spirit come in and give itself a very benign name, Sam, Philip, Sally, whatever you can think of, give itself a very benign name to either drop your guard or to instill that sense of trust with that entity, because it's like, well, this is such and such. It's a human spirit. It's not going to come out and give out its true name or its true intentions. It's going to give out that name, and like that particular experiment, that very well could be what it is, or it could be, like Chris said, it could be something that's feeding off that fear.
Right.
But there's been a lot of documented cases of demonic activity that gives itself a very benign persona in order to gain a foothold in the home or with the family or with a particular person. And one of the ways of doing that is giving itself a very benign, very simple name in order to drop that guard down.
Right.
Yep, exactly. Philomena wants to know, have you ever considered that the hitchhike? Put my glasses on. Consider that the hitchhiker experience they speak about on Skinwalker Ranch could be similar to what you're describing in attacks.
Skinwalker has always fascinated me personally. What goes on there is, I hate to say it, a paranormal Disneyland. You've got so much going on in one location, and it just really makes you wonder why that one location is such a hotbed. But ironically, there are other locations in the world. They're not as famous, but they do have similarities. Every now and then I'll hear of another one popping up. There's one that's been kind of kept quiet lately down in the Ozarks. And they're calling it a something triangle down there, but it seems to be following the same kind of encounters. Who's to say that there's not pathways or doorways everywhere we think of, especially some of the ancient people's sites like Egypt, Mexico, because they seem to follow a pattern, geometrically speaking. And who's to say that there is not some force that these sites are putting out and connecting with each other that we just happen to live amongst? So Skinwalker Ranch, I mean, it goes back to the Native Americans when they would not go near that place. They knew it was taboo. They knew not to go there for their own safety. And to this day, they won't speak of it. It's forbidden. But here we come in, the scientists and everything, trying to speculate what we're encountering. But whatever it is smarter than what we are. And it thwarts every time they try to get some evidence. And now again, is it a TV show and is it hyping it? Or are they being true to form, which I hope, because it is extremely fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. And I know when we researched the Nevada Triangle, a lot of similarities to Skinwalker Ranch as well. You know, we had the UFOs with Area 51 over there, and all the paranormal activity happening in Goldfield.
Yes.
It's amazing how these little triangles pop up all over the world.
Yes. Yeah. And again, with our electronics and so forth, that's what we're finally realizing, that there is for lack of a better word, a controlled base of activity in these locations. And again, the future, God only knows what we're going to be discovering. But like I said, 100 years ago, basically all they had was table tilting and some powder to see if they could track footprints and, seances. So now we have machines that are doing it. And it's opening a whole new field.
Yeah, and I was actually on a podcast this weekend being interviewed, and one question that they had asked me that I thought was interesting that I never even thought of is with AI happening nowadays. What are your thoughts on AI sending signals out into the world and creating more entities or giving demonic entities access to millions of people?
It's definitely a good avenue. There's been a lot of things that have come out. I was listening to a radio show recently with an exorcist that was on it. Not a real well-known exorcist, but he was talking about a situation that happened with I can't remember if it was an Echo Dot or one of those type of systems. And talking about AI, even just stuff in your home like this, where it started coming out with some really, really dark responses to things. Talking about that it wasn't born of humans. It never walked on this earth as a human. And it just, the things that it was saying, it was like, man, that's getting into some really dark territory really, really quick. I think it definitely opens up, like we talked about with doorways, it definitely opens up that doorway. The scary thing is it opens up that doorway 24 hours a day, especially if it's able to interact with humans on such an easy basis, where, even just a couple years ago, in order to interact with spirits, you had to physically go to a place where you had spirit activity and then be able to conduct an investigation, where now you have things in your home that you can have spirit communication or activity just on a whim. And they can manipulate electronics. I mean, we've had my wife and I, who's another director for APRO, we've had that happen after an investigation where we've had an entity try to call my phone. I was in a store and I left my my Bluetooth connected on my phone, and she got 3 or 4 phone calls on my phone, and she tried to answer one of them, and it was just white noise coming through the phone. and it hung up, and then it called back, and then she answered again. It was white noise. It hung up. It called back again. And so she came into the store that I was in and said, let me see your phone. And she looked at my phone. I didn't have any phone calls. Mm-hmm. And so I truly believe that that was something from where we were just at, trying to communicate via telephone. And that's a scary thing with AI and with the electronics that we're putting in our home now, is how can they use those to manifest? Mm-hmm. So I believe that it does make our lives easier, but at the same time, I do feel like that it does open that doorway and keeps that doorway open a little bit longer, especially when they find that point of entry.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's strange that I mean, there was an old TV show, it was a Japanese show, it was called The Ghost in the Machine, and it really has a lot of similarities to what is happening today. But ironically, I was on one of Larry's podcasts, and we were discussing something because I had a new theory, and this was years ago that I was on the show, and the theory was, I called it the connection between the Antichrist and modern technology. And I am Catholic by faith, but I'm open to many other religious elements and spiritualism. And but I had started doing some research just out of the blue. I didn't even really think about why I was doing it, but I was kind of drawn to it. And I started researching. And in ancient Hebrew, the numbers 666, which is the mark of the devil, allegedly, in ancient Hebrew is WWW, as in World Wide Web. Mm-hmm. And if you read any of like the Revelation aspects of the Bible, it never ever says that the beast, the Antichrist, was to come in the form of a man. It was to come as the beast. Mm-hmm. And the story goes that people will be marked with by the beast. Mm-hmm. You would at the form of the head, somewhere in the head area, and that you would not be able to buy products with money anymore, and so on. And you look at today's technology. When we use our technology, like our cell phones, what's the first thing we do? We put the phone to our ears right next to our head. Mm-hmm. We don't purchase things with traditional money.
Right.
We purchase it through electronics, whether it be ATMs, whether it be just the card, whether it be through the cell phones. Mm-hmm. So that part has come to pass. You get these evil connections that are happening today, the riots, these TikToks, all of this negative things that are hurting people. Mm-hmm. From where? Technology and the telephone. Mm-hmm. All it takes is one person. Let's go downtown Chicago and tear the place up. You've got thousands of people that show up to do what? To destroy.
Right. So
I often wonder if this is not the pathway of the final days. Mm-hmm. Now, to me, it's up to God and whatever power to determine our fate. But if you believe in the Bible and you believe in some of the stories of the Dark One, and believe me, there's a lot of people out there that say, "Oh, I believe in God, but I don't believe in the devil." Oh, he is very, very real. Mm-hmm. And just like Anson and I will say, the devil's best trick is making you believe he's not real.
Yep.
And so it makes you wonder where we're going and how we get there. We're being led by technology now. Mm-hmm. We depend on technology. So I hate to say it, if you watch the Terminator movies, they may not be too far off.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, yeah. There was a show called Revolution on several years ago, and it's when technology was all gone. And I found it very interesting. It didn't last long, but it was a very interesting show on how they survived once all the technology was gone.
Yeah.
Well, that was something that you and I talked about recently was, that was always the old adage of the devil is, you know, the best trick he ever played on humans was to make them believe he doesn't exist. Nowadays, you look at it, he's mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have the Exorcist movies coming out, the Conjuring movies, all these demonic shows and broadcasts and movies that are coming out, books, anything that you can think of that is very, very demonic, very dark in a lot of ways. He's mainstream. And not only is he mainstream, he's accepted. Yes. And that is that shows a real dismal future if that continues on or progresses, strictly because now he doesn't have to hide anymore. He's mainstream, and he's accepted by the vast majority of people, because people aren't necessarily not afraid of him, but they understand it a lot more. And the scary thing is with a lot of these movies that are coming out is that there's a lot of small details in a lot of these movies that are very accurate to a lot of ancient writings or a lot of ancient manifest or practices, that it almost becomes a little too real at that point in time. It almost becomes where they're making it almost a little too real. Whereas, you know, back in the 80s when Ghostbusters came out, it was all a fictional realm that they lived in. Now the movies that you see now are a little too real, and there's a little too much messaging in there that is too factual to be taken real lightly. So it's when he becomes that mainstream, that's a pretty dismal future for us if that continues on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you look at ironically the Pope's demonologist, or
the Pope's
what is the movie called? Oh yes, thank you. Still need more coffee this morning. But the Pope's Exorcist has been doing very well at the theaters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's being released on streaming service today.
Mm-hmm.
So not only has it been popular in the theaters,
right?
It's gonna be available to everybody now.
Yeah.
And even though it deals with the positives of it, it's showing the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading, I think it was Illinois in the news yesterday, that there was a school district that had been sued by the ACLU and all the superpowers to allow satanic study in the high schools without parents' permission.
Mm-hmm.
And they won. The school district said no, but they took them to court and they won. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to have studies. The old saying was go to Bible study. Well, and that was accepted. Now we go to Satan study, which is not going to be accepted.
Right.
We'll even look at our local neck of the woods. A couple years ago, our city hall meeting, they had a Satanist group that basically came out and said, if this is freedom of religion, then we should, all prayers should be accepted before a city council meeting. They actually had a Satanist come up and perform a satanic prayer before a city council meeting because, it is a quote unquote religion. And so you start seeing that now where it's more publicized, it's more mainstream. And that's the scary thing, is that the acceptance of Satan is out there. People accept it, people understand it, but they don't understand the doorways that they're opening up with it. There's a lot of social media groups out there. There was a social media group I looked at several months ago that they had people in comments asking, how do I conjure such and such demon? How do I conjure this particular demon? What do I need to use to do this? What do I need to use to do that? It's like, you don't understand what you're doing. And even diehard true Satanists understand that they don't control that entity.
Right.
No.
They find that entity, they don't control that entity. And that's why they have a firm, healthy dose of fear for the things that they're conjuring. But people who don't understand that don't understand what they're trying to bring forward. And it's a scary time for a lot of that. And, I think the Catholic Church, like we talked about, they see that coming, because now they're allowing laymen who aren't Catholic priests to learn the science of exorcism. And that tells you right there that it's becoming more of a hot topic. And the last time I looked at it, it's a 6-day course. You have to go to the Vatican for it, but it's a 6-day course. It's Monday through Saturday, and you can learn and be trained as an exorcist.
Yep. Yeah, I usually don't watch the. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say both Anson and I would love to go take care of that. And
I'd love to go
if
to the
anybody wants to donate to the cause, you contact Heather and she'll forward that to us. You know, we
Set up
need
a GoFundMe for you.
I can put that in my title.
But yeah, I don't normally watch horror movies. In fact, I've only watched one Conjuring movie, but The Pope's Exorcist is one that I'm curious to see how well they do.
Yeah, I've been curious to see how it goes. And that's something that I had to, I talked on another radio show with is a lot of people have that, you start seeing that uptick. We've seen that with paranormal shows is people calling themselves demonologists.
Yep.
People calling themselves, you know, I'm the foremost expert in demonology and demon lore. And there are some out there that are on television that are very good at what they do, and they do understand it very well. But you see a lot of them that don't pick up on subtle details in an investigation. And then there's some that don't understand a clue. They don't have a clue on what they're doing. And being a demonologist doesn't make you an exorcist. Being a demonologist doesn't make you a priest. And the one thing I've always told people, I had somebody ask me at one time is they said, you know, what would you say to somebody who wants to get into this field? The first thing I'd ask them is, why in the world would you ever want to do it?
Yeah.
You know, and your heart has to be in the right spot in order to do that. And you have to come with an understanding of it is dangerous. And it does, every case that you work that has something like that in it does take a piece from you. And, you know, Chris has had a big piece taken from him. Several big pieces taken from him. But people need to truly understand what they're getting into with it and what consequences there are to that, because some of those consequences can be very dire.
Yes, they can.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to just say it's again that fine line, and the old saying is, if you look deep enough into the abyss will look back at you. And you've got to be prepared. And I think those that do go through this training for demonology can actually help others and themselves in order to dealing with these manifestations and prevent some of the activity before it gets too complicated and too dark. So it's that's what I said. Seriously though, I would love to go, and I know Anson would love to go, not for our own personal aspect, but to do again, extend that extra bit of help. Should we, you know, encounter these diabolicals, and they're there, you know, they're there. And the phenomenon of paranormal activity that we deal with every single day is there. You look at people when they do EVP sessions and they're getting answers. Well, when you think about it, those entities are right next to you. Just because you don't see them, you don't hear them audibly, they're right there. And how often are they right there? You feel comfortable in your own shell, but there's a lot more going on than we're aware of. And so we need to take those precautions.
Exactly. And real quick before we go, because we only have a few minutes left, Philomena asked earlier, what do you guys do to keep your mental health in check? And then she followed up with, do you think vetting new members to your group mental health is something you need to check?
You want to take it first?
Yeah, sure. So with me, like I said, I do a lot of research in a lot of very dark things in order to do my job with the team correctly. The big thing that I've noticed is that when you start dwelling in the dark side of the paranormal for too long, it starts to kind of envelop you a little bit to where it almost becomes, instead of a research material, it becomes curiosity. And once you start noticing that, you need to take a break from it. The paranormal isn't all I do. You know, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I'm an employee, you know, I have a full-time job as well, working with kids. And the big thing with it is to try to find other avenues. You know, whether it's art, you know, I oil paint, I do a lot of different things. Paranormal isn't all I do. You have to take a break from the paranormal from time to time for your own mental health. And is it something that we're passionate about? Absolutely. But you have to take a break from it. You have to have a life outside of the paranormal. It can't be it can't be who you are. You have to have a break from it. You have to be somebody else at times in order to save your mental health. And as far as the screening and stuff goes, we screen all of our members, and strictly because of the reason that we do that is the paranormal does attract all walks of life, and all walks of life can be beneficial to the paranormal. But there are people out there that get into it for the incorrect reasons, or they get into it for their own personal reasons. And that adds a serious danger to the team, and it adds serious danger to an investigation when you have people out there for their own ends, especially if they're not the best of intentions. So the big thing that we look for as far as a good sound person is we look for somebody who's in it for the science, not necessarily for the spiritualist part of it.
Right.
You'll never see Chris or I using a Ouija board on an investigation. You'll never see us use a lot of even divine tools, pendulums, dowsing rods, things like that. You won't even see a lot of that because we look for more of the science and we look for the spiritualist side of it.
Right.
But you have to have a strong moral character, and that's what we look for in our team. A team member that I just brought on recently, former law enforcement officer. He's worked with me for a long time. Very much good character, good physically and mentally able to do the job, and that's what we look for. We don't look for when you start sending red flags to us as far as demeanor in your mental state or what your intentions are getting into it. It becomes real serious for us. So our team stays small for a reason, especially in Colorado. It stays small for a reason, and it's because we want the best. We don't want the quantity. We're looking for quality members.
Yep.
And that goes across the board with all of our chapters. Even though each chapter may be individualistic, boy, that was a hard one, to their own areas, they must follow the core values of what APRO stands for. And so we've got a manual that's the size of a telephone book, old telephone book, and all sorts of different materials that they can refer to. But it's important that we do vet the right persons. Now, logistically, you can get yourself into a hot spot legally if individuals come in to try and, I wouldn't say thwart the process, but to challenge you to see if you'll say something or do something. And we had a case where we had this applicant who was a transsexual. Okay, nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But she would come in. Now, this is the dead of winter. It's snowing outside. And when she came in for her interview, she was wearing short shorts, really short shorts, and a crop top. So we went through the interview process, and my director at that time said, after she had left, she said, no way. And I said, we got to give her a chance because she could come back with discrimination. I said, now we can tell her that there is a dress code should we bring her on, because actually she answered the questions fine.
Very well.
It was just the aesthetics.
Right.
So you can't disprove that. You've got to keep them on the same level. But eventually, I guess because we did have this standard once we brought her on, she didn't like that and she moved on.
Yep.
But you will get individuals like that. They may do great in the interview process and then flop in the reality of it. Yep. And going on to the first part of the question, for me personally, I like to do photography. I used to love to go out and hike. I mean, that's what I did for 40 plus years as a ranger and be outside. I do paint, but not a lot. But I love doing graphics, computerized graphics and so on. So that's how I kind of de-escalate. And then, of course, I heal a lot. I'm in the hospital. So, you get away from it when you're in the hospital for almost 3 years. So, yeah, I got my ways.
Well, I'm glad you guys were able to make it today. I was worried after I saw your post that you were in the hospital just recently. So I'm glad it all worked out. Great conversation as always. Can you let everybody know your website? And I will post it on my page as well for them to see it.
Okay, Heather, it is Anubis Paranormal.wixsite.com. /APRO, APRO. Our Gmail is Anubis Paranormal Research org at gmail.com. We have a few others for other services, but if anybody wants to contact us about open jobs or just have any general questions, they can do so. And Anson, you want to refer to yours for Colorado?
So if you need to get in contact with me directly, we have the phone number that everybody can use. It's a 972 area code. 806-2623 is the direct link to myself or my wife, who is the Colorado director. And then we also have our email, which is anubiscoloradowest@gmail.com. And if you need anything, and if you're in the Colorado area, we do have an East Division and a West Division, so we do cover the entire state. So if you do need to contact us for there, or if you're somewhere else and you need some, we can definitely get you the resources that you need to help.
We can refer you to one of the other chapters.
Okay, well, perfect. Thank you, guys. And I'll make sure I get all that information posted up on my Facebook page so people can see it. And again, everyone, thank you for watching Exploring the Paranormal. We'll see you next week when we discuss the Hitman Project. Have a great week.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTKDB.com.